Hey there, fellow Patriots. Welcome back to Patriots of the American Republic. We've got another one with some quick moving action over the weekend, so I figured to hop on here and give you guys a new video, right? So since 1979, it seems we've had a constant issue with the Middle East. Some may say we've had an issue with them since our support for Israel when Israel, became a sovereign nation back in 1949. No matter what period of time you point to, it seems that the Middle East is in, usual conflict. Regardless of whether it's a religious dispute, land dispute, or some other reason, peace in the Middle East may never happen because of the numerous players involved. In this video, we will cover the events that got us here, prompted us to get involved, and what is the significance. We'll also tackle the apparent divide, the interesting divide between the two parties. Now, let's turn back the clock. October 7th, 2023, Israel experienced their own 9/11 attack where Hamas invaded Israel and killed over 1,000 civilians, including women, children, and sadly babies, right? One thing is to attack a military compound, but as we've covered before, cowards don't do that. They're going after unarmed civilians, people who are just enjoying life, enjoying an event, or, just enjoying the day off, right? We did an extensive 3 videos regarding the attack, the aftermath, and the unfortunate rise of open anti-Semitism from apparently both sides of the political aisle, sadly. Even though, the right, many on the right claim that it's not anti-Semitism, but it is. And we're not talking about criticism, because I already covered criticism, what that is. But when you have this vitriol, this hatred towards Jews, then it is anti-Semitism, right? And again, it seems to be coming from both sides of the aisle, interestingly. During this time, Israel went on the attack as it vowed to eliminate Hamas so that it would never attack again. As predicted, the campaign came under fire as the media began to show civilians caught in the crossfire. As reported, though, this would be a strategy Hamas would use to exploit in order to gain sympathy amongst the international community, and it worked like clockwork. It worked to a certain extent because Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, wasn't falling for it. He continued his assault irrespective, right? He said, I've had enough. You guys have attacked me like 5 or 6 times. And every time we give in to these peace talks and these peace negotiations after you do the tactics that you do, and then here we are back in a situation where you continue to kill our people. We're not going to do it anymore. Now, also expected were attacks from Hezbollah, another Islamic terrorist group. And it's rumored that there have been reports that it's had long time connections with Iran, who began to attack Israel from the northern side around the Lebanese border, right? From Lebanon, they were launching rockets into Israel. So in addition to Hezbollah attacking Israel, another proxy group such as the Houthis, who are also funded by Iran, also hit Israel and attacked U.S. forces as well. In October 2024, Iran decided to strike Israel directly, which added on to the escalation in the area. And that's eventually what's bringing us to this current situation where Israel has decided to just flat out attack various targets in Iran over the past couple of weeks. Now, after failed negotiations between U.S. and Iran, Israel decides to go on the offensive in order to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear power, essentially. According to many in the intelligence community, Iran is either weeks or months away from gaining a nuclear bomb, which Israel fears it will use on them. Given the 30 plus years that Iran has been calling for the death and destruction of Israel, and also the U.S., Bibi Netanyahu is taking their chance at face value and not dismissing it as simple, hateful rhetoric. He's taking it as a direct threat, and I think he should, given the decades of examples of terrorism around the globe, both directly and indirectly from Iran.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were the victims of a Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime. Today, the Jewish state refuses to be a victim of a nuclear Holocaust perpetrated by the Iranian regime. Now, as Prime Minister, I've made it clear time and again, Israel will never allow those who call for our annihilation to develop the means to achieve that goal. Tonight, Israel backs those words with action. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear weaponization program. We targeted Iran's main enrichment facility in Natanz. We targeted Iran's leading nuclear scientists working on the Iranian bomb. We also struck at the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the Middle East conflict that...
This attack has predictably sparked retaliation from Iran as it unloaded a barrage of missile attacks on Israel. Most of those were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome, as well as many anti-missile defense equipment provided by the U.S., but unfortunately, not all missiles were intercepted. Just a few days ago, a civilian hospital was hit in Israel, and reports have come in stating that the Iranians are purposely targeting civilian buildings.
Straight to a Fox News alert. At least 85 people were hurt in the latest Iranian ballistic missile attack. This in Tel Aviv and beyond, including a direct hit on a hospital in southern Israel. Young children are among the wounded in the attack.
And earlier, our foreign correspondent, Greg Palcott, capturing footage of Israeli air defenses trying to stop the incoming fire.
They're not taking a break. We've been listening to the anti-missile defenses. There's a couple right there. It's a wake-up call for this country, for the city, that this war between Iran and Israel is still on.
And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is promising to, quote, exact the full price from the tyrants in Tehran. Mike Tobin is live in Israel at the scene of one of those attacks. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Griff. Yeah, this is the scene where one of the missiles got through the air defenses and struck in the middle of Ramat Gan. That's a neighborhood here in Tel Aviv. As I step out of the way, I can tell you, it's kind of a modernized both residential and business area. And what you're looking at now is pretty much the center of the impact. I'm told by Magen David Adom EMT that one of the missiles did make a direct hit on a building here. And what you're looking at is a lot of the damage from the shrapnel and the force of the blast as it went through this modernized neighborhood. Remarkably, you talk about 35 people who were injured. Those injuries are mostly minor. We got 6 serious injuries, and it's quite dramatic the fact that there aren't more casualties because of these massive missiles that are crashing down, and that's largely because Israelis are respecting the warnings and heading to the bomb shelters. Now, there was also a missile that hit in the area of Tel Aviv in a town called, or a neighborhood, I should say, called Holon. That is an older residential area, and again, you have dramatically minimized casualties given the force of the impact of that missile that made it through the defenses. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as you mentioned, got to social media, and he said that the tyrants in Iran, that Israel will exact the full price from the tyrants in Iran.
So as you can see in that video, Prime Minister vowed harsher response, and it did. Israel, along with, I imagine, approval of neighboring countries, continued its aerial assault, knocking out key targets that the Israeli military selected. Now, think about what that means. Israel had to get permission from other neighboring countries in order to fly its jets over those countries in order to hit its targets. So if you think a little bit deeper into it, this essentially could mean that Iran doesn't have any neighboring allies in that region at the moment, as those planes were obviously green lit. Because think about it, if I'm one of those neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, whatever have you in between, right? In order for those Israeli planes to fly over those countries and not get shot down, they would need permission, clearance permission from those countries. So that's pretty interesting. In addition to that, the fact that Iran is targeting civilian buildings, and there's absolute silence from the left. The left has gone after Israel over its Gaza bombardment and the civilians caught in the crossfire, night and day and night, protest after protest. But when it comes to Iran targeting Israel's civilian buildings and civilian areas, crickets. The left is just, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They have zero consistency whatsoever. They have zero standards. Now, as the attacks go back and forth and the issue continues to escalate, many people have asked President Trump, is he going to get involved? For the past week or so, President Trump has kept all options on the table. Well, last night on Saturday, he jumped in and bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites with, I don't know, I think it was like 6 B stealth bombers, right? It was an amazing attack. Very successful one, apparently, because nobody was put in harm's way as far as like our personnel. All the pilots flew and returned back to base safe and sound. So at around 10 p.m. Eastern time, again Saturday, President Trump addressed the nation on his course of action. Let's take a listen.
First, let's go to the White House.
Thank you very much.
This is a Fox News alert. Here's the president.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God, I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, it's interesting, on a Thursday, my wife and I were discussing the situation. I asked her what would she do if she was President Trump, and then obviously I told her what I would do. Exactly what I told her that I would do is exactly how it played out. I essentially told her that I would allow Israel to keep hammering away at Iranian targets, softening them up, essentially, until they were soft enough where I would come in and just lay down the hammer, right? Seal the nail in the coffin, if you will, and bomb whatever I needed to bomb, right? Now, guys, I'm not suggesting that I'm some type of military expert or anything, but I'm just pointing out the fact that the course of action that President Trump took on Saturday makes sense to me, right? Now, let's talk about the party divide. The actions of President Trump have had both parties split, to be honest. On the left, the main leadership is, for the most part, pro-Israel, but their base sure as heck isn't. And we've seen that with all of the anti-Semitic protests going on, specifically in New York City, but also across multiple college campuses. On the Republican side, both the leadership and the base is split. For example, isolationists like Mark Dice, Candace Owens, and Tucker Carlson, and many others, which, by the way, I'm huge fans of. I've shown their clips on my videos plenty of times. They have taken this posture of absolutely no wars whatsoever, even if it means abandoning Israel. I've shared with you guys from a biblical perspective that during the last wars, Israel would stand alone. And I thought, based on Obama's relationship with Israel, that was going to come from the Democratic side. But obviously, it's looking like it's going to come from both sides. Or, or at the very, it could come from our side, but at the very least, it'll come from both sides. So thanks to the irresponsible and corrupt actions of Bush Jr., we got into a bunch of foreign wars, which cost thousands of U.S. troops' lives and trillions in taxpayer dollars, with nothing more than a regime change. To be honest, I supported war efforts in Afghanistan after 9/11, but the Iraq war never made sense to me, which is why I don't support us funding like the Ukrainian war and giving them a blank check and essentially getting involved in something that really doesn't involve us. It's not our war, and I made that very clear because we have no ties to the Ukrainian country aside from the potential corruption that it has with the Democratic Party. Israel is a different story for biblical reasons, and I shared those biblical reasons in those 3 videos that I did back then. But these isolationists that claim to be Christians seem to be misinterpreting the scriptures in order to justify their abandonment of Israel, which I'll cover in another video a little bit further on down. But for now, I want to focus how the right is utterly shocked and surprised. Many on the right, are shocked and surprised by Trump's actions as they express sentiment that Trump has changed or they never signed up for this. Let's take a look at just one particular person.
Trump, they pointed out, was elected on getting us out of wars in the Middle East.
You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
When did Trump suggest that Iran was even on his mind?
Everybody, no nuclear weapons. You can't give them nuclear weapons.
It'd be one thing if Trump had campaigned on stopping Iran's nuclear program.
Don't let Iran have nuclear weapons. That's my only thing I have to tell you today.
But for Trump to just foist this policy on us, completely out of the blue.
Including Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. That's all. They can't have nuclear weapons. It's too destructive, too powerful. They can't have it.
Without any warning.
I just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon.
Well, it's a betrayal, wouldn't you say? What else do you call it when you say one thing on the campaign trail?
They cannot have a nuclear weapon. That was the only thing. The one thing I said, you cannot have.
And another thing when you get into office.
You can't let Iran have nuclear weapons.
Now, I don't want the U.S. to get bogged down in another war in the Middle East. I think many of the arguments regarding Iran are bogus, as I've said repeatedly on the show. But it also seems strange.
So it's clear that some on the right jumped on the Trump wagon without really paying attention to the specifics behind what, back then candidate Trump was saying on the campaign trail or even during his first term in the White House. So Tucker Carlson, who again is one of my favorites while he was on Fox News, apparently was against Trump's involvement in this Iran versus Israel situation.
So the headlines started flying. Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon lead MAGA resistance to Iran war. And at this point, and let's just be optimistic and hope that it's going to remain like this. Let's not succumb to the fear. It's so very easy for people to start getting concerned and start worrying about the worst case scenarios, which often usually do not happen. So very different when President Trump is just not stopping Israel from attacking Iran versus joining in the attack versus putting troops on the ground like George W. Bush did in Iraq, specifically for the regime change, which obviously we all know was based off of the WMD neocon hoax. President Trump did respond to him on Truth Social, and when I saw screenshots of this going around, I gave it a 50% chance that it could have been a fake parody screenshot. So being your trusted media analyst, I did my due diligence, went directly to the source, and it is real, where he did post, "Somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon." This is where the nuance comes in. A lot of people just don't have the ability to understand the complexities of situations. Everything is either black or white to them. This may actually be true, okay? I mean, the Iranian leadership are completely insane. I don't even think they allow women to drive over there, force them to wear burqas everywhere. And so it is understandable that their enemies in the region, primarily Israel, doesn't want them to have a nuclear weapon. Now, would they be able to hit us with their nuclear weapon? No. Iran couldn't even send a postcard to the United States, let alone any of their missiles, okay? So they're definitely not a threat to us here, but of course, Israel's problems always become America's problems. Not that it should be that way, but the way that our foreign policy works due to, well, certain influences that you're not supposed to talk about that are operating in Washington, D.C.
So I've said this before and I'll say it again. We struggle as a party because we are hardly ever unified in one thing. Democrats will walk lock and step in just about everything, no matter how insane the idea is. Yeah, you might have one or two that drop off, but for the most part, 99% of them stay together. They back each other up, which is why, in my eyes, they're able to get more done than Republicans can. That's just how I feel. But just like Elon, Tucker seems to have seen the errors of his ways, as President Trump confirms that Tucker called him and apologized to him.
Have you seen the Tucker Carlson Senator Ted Cruz interview? It seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of dividing a lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. Tucker's a nice guy. He called and apologized the other day because he thought he said things that were a little bit too strong, and I appreciated that. And Ted Cruz is a nice guy. I mean, he's been with me for a long time. I'd say once the race was over, he's been with me ever since, right? But very simple. If they think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then they should oppose me, but nobody thinks it's okay. People that don't want, I don't want to fight either. I'm not looking to fight. But if it's a choice between fighting and them having a nuclear weapon, you have to do what you have to do. Maybe we won't have to fight. Don't forget, we haven't been fighting. We add a certain amount of genius to everything, but we haven't been fighting at all. Israel's done a very good job of that. But we'll see what happens. The bottom line is they can't have nuclear. And if Ted, I can't imagine that Ted Cruz said it's okay for Iran to have nuclear, including Tucker. I don't think Tucker says it's okay. The problem is then they get themselves into a thing. They don't want them to have nuclear, but then they say, well, we don't want to fight. Well, you're going to have to make a choice because it's possible that you're going to have to fight for them not to have nuclear. And it's interesting because I did ask Tucker, I said, well, are you okay with nuclear weapons being in the hands of Iran? And he sort of didn't like that. He didn't want to really, but he sort of didn't like that. And I said, well, if it's okay with you, then you and I do have a difference. But it's really not okay with him. Therefore, you may have to fight, and maybe it'll end, and maybe it'll end very quickly. But there's no way that you can allow, whether you have to fight or not, you can allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because the entire world will blow up. I'm not going to let that happen.
Mr. President.
So, as we just witnessed, rifts can happen within the party naturally. Sometimes, however, they can happen unnaturally, where the media tries to coerce and create a rift between the members within the administration. President Trump is sure on the intelligence that he has that Iran is within striking distance of achieving nuclear capabilities, but the media is saying that his very own intelligence agency is saying otherwise. Let's take a listen.
20 years ago, you were skeptical of a Republican administration that attacked a Middle East country on the idea of questionable intelligence of weapons of mass destruction. How is this moment different with Iran?
Well, there were no weapons of mass destruction. I never thought there were. And that was somewhat pre-nuclear. You know, there was a nuclear age, but nothing like it is today. And it looked like I'm right about the material that they've gathered already. It's a tremendous amount of material. And I think within a matter of weeks, or certainly within a matter of months, they're going to be able to have a nuclear weapon. We can't let that happen. I was very much opposed to Iraq. I said it loud and clear, but I was a civilian, but I guess I got a lot of publicity. But I was very much opposed to the Iraq war. And I actually did say, don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. But I said, if you're going to go in, keep the oil. But they didn't do that.
What intelligence do you have that Iran is building a nuclear weapon? Your intelligence community has said they have no evidence that they are at this point.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
She's wrong.
Naturally, what the leftist media reports must always be scrutinized given their track record. Thankfully, Tulsi Gabbard has taken to her social media platform to call out the fake media and confirm she's on the same page with the president. Let's take a look.
Okay, so you heard her say there, she's wrong. So Tulsi Gabbard, Hal, did respond on social media. We have the tweet here. She also posted a clip of her own confirmation hearing to become Director of National Intelligence. So we're going to play the video. She's using this video clip as a way to essentially say she and the president are on the same page here. So Tulsi responding this way, saying, quote, "The dishonest media is intentionally taking my testimony out of context." We have the tweet here saying this, and spreading fake news as a way to manufacture division. America has intelligence that Iran is at the point that it can produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months if they decide to finalize the assembly. She says President Trump has been clear that can't happen, and I agree. So Gabbard saying that on social media, saying she and the president agree, blaming the dishonest media. She also posted this clip in this very tweet, like I said, from her confirmation hearing that is, in her words, Hal, being misconstrued by her critics. Let's listen.
Iran continues to seek expansion of its influence in the Middle East, despite the degradation to its proxies and defenses during the Gaza conflict. Iran has developed and maintains ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and UAVs, including systems capable of striking U.S. targets and allies in the region. Tehran has shown a willingness to use these weapons, including during a 2020 attack on U.S. forces in Iraq and in attacks against Israel in April and October 2024. Iran's cyber operations and capabilities also present a serious threat to U.S. networks and data.
So naturally, anything and everything President Trump does or says, the left has to go against, right? Democrats are already saying Trump skipped diplomacy and skipped presidential process of going to war and have already begun to sound the drums of impeachment. Here we go again.
In a stunning turn of events, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and several Democrats are pushing for President Donald Trump's impeachment following a recent U.S. military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. The attack, ordered without congressional approval, has sparked fierce debate over presidential authority. AOC labeled the decision a grave violation of the Constitution, warning it risks entangling the U.S. in a long-term conflict in the Middle East. Other Democrats, like Representative Sean Casten of Illinois, echoed her stance, calling it an unambiguous impeachable offense for bypassing Congress on such a critical matter. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also criticized Trump, holding him responsible for any fallout from this unilateral action. On the other side, Vice President J.D. Vance defended the strike, asserting the president has authority to prevent nuclear proliferation. Republican voices have dismissed the impeachment calls as overreach, pointing to similar actions by past presidents. This controversy reignites a long-standing debate over war powers in the U.S. government. What do you think about this divide?
The hypocrisy is once again front and center. As mentioned in this video, previous presidents have approved attacks on specific targets without congressional approval. The only time congressional approval is required is if we are actually going to war with a specific country, which is not what is being done here. That's not what President Trump has done or is calling for. These were specific targets that, yes, can get us into war, but that is not where we're at this particular moment. Furthermore, let's take a trip down memory lane and see who else approved specific strikes with or without congressional approval. Obama was known for dropping bombs like they were fireworks during his administration. During his presidency, he bombed Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Mali, and Niger without going to Congress and declaring war. In some of these cases, like I said, he didn't get approval from Congress to begin with. But let's remind ourselves of Obama's position at one point regarding this specific situation.
A nuclear Iran is a threat to our national security, and it's a threat to Israel's national security. We cannot afford to have a nuclear arms race in the most volatile region of the world. Iran's a state sponsor of terrorism, and for them to be able to provide nuclear technology to non-state actors, that's unacceptable. And they have said that they want to see Israel wiped off the map.
So naturally, the left will start their impeachment campaign this week and make proposals to limit the president's ability to carry out these types of missions. What's interesting is how the left shows their hypocrisy, as they did not hesitate to help and support Ukraine under Joe Biden. But now they don't want to get dragged into war. Oh, we were okay to get dragged into war between Ukraine and Russia. But now, because it's Trump and it's Israel and Iran, now it's a different story. To be honest with you, and I'm just being honest because I like to call balls and strikes. The right kind of did the same thing. We didn't want to get involved in the war with Ukraine, right? But we're okay to help out Israel. And at the very, very least, my stance has not changed. Why do I say that? Because like I said in those 3 videos, I don't believe we should get involved in foreign wars with the exception of Israel because of the biblical connections that we have as a Christian nation, and that one being a Jewish nation. Now, it's predominantly Jewish, but again, you have to remember that there are 3 major religions that reside in there. You've got Judaism, you've got Islam, and you've got Christianity. Now, a lot of people are going to take the position, well, those are Jews and they're non-believers. They don't believe in Jesus Christ. Guess what? There is a good amount of Messianic Jews that do live in Israel, right? These are Jewish people that actually do believe in Jesus Christ as the Messiah. And what's interesting is the Bible tells us that those types of people, there will always be Jewish believers. Okay? So you can't just turn your back and claim to be a Christian. And again, I'm going to do a different video on that, so I don't want to get too much in the weeds. But my support for the land of Israel is attached to the fact that this is where our Lord Jesus was born, and it's where the Bible says he will return once again. So by that means alone, my only exception of getting involved in a foreign war is the same today as it was 2 years ago, as it's been essentially since I've become a Christian, to be quite frank. But if you remember, if I'm not mistaken, in the speech that he gives, that President Trump gives after he bombs Iran, President Trump warned Iran about retaliation. But it would be unrealistic for, honestly, someone to think that Iran would not retaliate, given the evil of this supreme Ayatollah's heart, right? Naturally, Iran cannot hit us, at least the mainland, right? They can attack maybe vessels that we have out there, or stations or whatever the case may be, but they cannot attack the mainland. Their missiles don't go this far, right? But Israel will be a main target of the supreme Ayatollah's wrath, and there are already reports coming in that Iran has retaliated against Israel.
In the hours following the American attacks, Iran began its response, starting with a series of missiles directed at Israel. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it's launched 40 missiles, Authorities in Israel reported that more than 80 people suffered minor injuries.
But first, Mike Tobin live on the ground in Tel Aviv with the very latest. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Griff. And once again, the sirens wailed in central Israel this morning as another Iranian attack was inbound. The IDF now says some 27 Iranian missiles were part of that attack, and they've updated the number of drones, saying 30 drones were fired at Israel today. Almost all of the projectiles were intercepted mid-air, causing great booms in the sky as they were intercepted. Several did get through with massive warheads, causing a tremendous amount of destruction on the ground, particularly with the projectiles that hit here in central Israel in the Tel Aviv area. That being said, Magen David Adom Ambulance Agency reports some 80 injuries, but most of those injuries are light. Only one substantial injury, which is remarkable given the amount of power that was in the warheads of those particular missiles. Now, the Iranian foreign minister promises more attacks like this with a threatening post that reads in part, in accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its sovereignty, interests, and people.
You know, I'm curious to see what President Trump is going to do next, because remember, you got to understand that President Trump is not a bluffer. He's not the one to say stuff and not follow through with it. He told Iran, this is the time for peace. If you come to the table now, we can talk. If you don't, we got more targets where it's going to be harder, it's going to be faster. I imagine based on his type of language, we're going to take out the Ayatollah. And again, that's going to escalate things, but that's where we're at. Iran has the option to come to the table and say, listen, all right, cool. Hey, we fold, but you know, sometimes ego gets in the way, right? So as tensions mount and the situation escalates, Iran has been a threat to the United States for so many years. As we can see in the image that I'm showing right now, right? They captured a bunch of U.S. soldiers and humiliated us on a world stage. Humiliated them, humiliated us, and we did nothing. In fact, under Democratic leadership, we've helped Iran continue their terroristic activities. Let's not forget that Obama gave them billions in foreign currencies on pallets flown in the middle of the night, and some bogus story about us owing it to them. Let's take a listen and remind ourselves of what took place back then.
Welcome back to The Lead. New outrage on Capitol Hill today after Obama administration officials briefed lawmakers about two other cash payments to Iran. Sources tell CNN that in addition to the previously reported $400 million in cash given in conjunction with U.S. hostages held in Iran being freed, including Washington Post journalist Jason Rezaian, two additional cash payments totaling $1.3 billion were made, as first reported by this morning's Wall Street Journal. Republicans such as Senator Marco Rubio argued, quote, by sending the signal that hostages are a legitimate means of securing concessions from our government, the Obama administration has put countless American lives at risk through this payment, as Rubio wrote in today's Tampa Bay Times. Obama administration officials note that the $1.7 billion belongs to Iran, having been awarded by the Hague Tribunal, stemming from the U.S. not delivering fighter jets that Iran had paid for before the 1979 Iranian Revolution. On CNN earlier today, Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken acknowledged that no one can guarantee that none of the cash payment will end up funding Iran-backed terrorist groups.
We can't say that not one single dollar will go there. What we can say, based on what we've seen so far, is that virtually all of it is going into the economy, not into the military.
I'm Ami Horowitz, and this is The Rant. Iran recently grabbed members of the U.S. Navy and then released photos of them on their knees with their hands behind their heads. So what were the repercussions of taking such direct action against our Navy? What terror did we instill in the hearts of the Iranian regime for embarrassing our servicemen and women like that? We officially ended the sanctions and agreed to release $150 billion in funds to the terrorist state.
Billions given to a terroristic country. For all of the time that we keep saying that we fight terrorism or that we're fighting, we're actually, unfortunately, sponsoring it. We're helping it, sadly. Because not only was it under the Obama administration, but under the Biden administration, we released tens of billions in sanctioned funds to Iran. Check this one out.
So now we learned Tehran's going to get richer. Lindsey Graham sounding the alarm. Administration greenlights roughly $10 billion for Iran. State Department insists it's only for humanitarian aid. Sounds familiar, does it not? Jillian Turner's following the money from the State Department to explain this. Jillian.
Good morning to you, Bill. So the Biden administration is renewing what is called a sanctions waiver. It's going to allow the Iranian regime imminently to access $10 billion in frozen funds that are being held inside Iraq. This is a decision that comes as Iranian-backed forces are continually attacking U.S. forces inside the Middle East. Now, despite, I think a total, we're looking at 56 strikes now in 29 days, State Department officials insist they are unconcerned about the prospect of that money being used to fund terrorists. Listen.
We don't worry about optics, we worry about reality. And the reality is that these funds, as I said, can only be used for humanitarian and other non-sanctionable purposes.
The United States stands with the people of Israel in the face of these terrorist assaults. Israel has the right to defend itself and its people. Full stop. My administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering.
Rock solid and unwavering, huh? That's really weird because you just handed Iran $6 billion a couple of weeks ago in some weird prisoner swap, and you told us, your Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, told us when questioned about what if this money will be used for something really bad? No. We were assured by Blinken that that just wasn't possible. America would hold Iran to account. Iran, the godfather of all terrorism in the Middle East. Yeah, sure. You're going to hold them to account. I don't really think so.
So the stupidity of this person to think that Iran won't use this in a terroristic manner is absurd. Or maybe the stupidity resides in the person who actually believes this individual's fantasy story, right? Regardless of how you feel regarding this particular situation, our president's instincts have been on target each and every time with each and every scenario that has come up, whether it's been tariffs, whether it's been illegal immigration, whether it's been, whatever, right? Any and every case, this man has been on point. So I don't think that now is a good moment for our party to splinter off. Our president needs our support, and so does our military. As you saw in several of our examples today, many of them were attacked, and Iran had zero consequences. So if it's not done today, it needs to be done tomorrow. And just like President Trump said regarding his conversation with Tucker, do you guys want them to have a nuclear capabilities? No, of course not. So then we might have to get involved. And that's a reality of the situation that we're in. Again, do we say, no, we don't want to get involved? Listen, sometimes we have to make these choices. Sometimes we have to make these decisions if it's for the safety of us and our allies. Well, some people might take the position, well, no, I don't want to do our allies. Well, guess what? If the day of tomorrow China and Russia decide to join forces and invade us, we're going to want allies. So I think it's important for us to maintain our actual allies, right? And help them out in their times. And Israel's helped us out plenty of times as well, right? So it's a mutual benefit. They need us, we help them, we need them, they help us, and it goes back and forth. Now, I do want to touch really quickly how difficult this decision is for President Trump. It's not an easy one. It's hard to say that it's the right answer or even if it's the wrong answer. I don't know. Because you can take the posture and say, well, we don't want to get involved. Okay, what happened when we didn't want to get involved in World War II? How many millions of people died because we didn't get involved? Or we got involved later in the game is what I should say. Like I'm talking about like at the beginning of the war, up until we got attacked in Pearl Harbor. If we had, let's say, gotten involved from the very beginning, how many millions of lives could have been saved with our involvement from the very beginning, as opposed to waiting, letting all the destruction that took place, between Hitler and or Germany and Italy and Japan, and then we got in, and then these guys were so entrenched that it took even more lives, right? So the more, for instance, the more power that they had, the harder it became to take them down. Where if you do it at the very beginning, maybe they're not as strong, maybe they're not as powerful, maybe they're not as organized, and you may have an easier time. I don't know. Again, I'm not saying that I know what the right answer is or the wrong answer is. I'm just telling you guys, if I were president, the things that we have to weigh in, right? It cannot be, I don't want to ever get involved, period. And it can't be, I want to get involved in everything. It's got to be a balanced decision. And I do think that that's what President Trump is doing. He's looking at everything that he's got, everything that's going on, and all options are on the table. And I back him up. So guys, thank you so much for joining me. Have a great one. God bless. God bless Israel. God bless our troops. God bless President Trump. And God bless America. Take care and have a good night, guys.